Hello everybody and welcome to a brand new Elder Scrolls Online character build guide video. Now this is my part 2 of my character guide videos, and this one's going a little bit more in depth into why I do a lot of the gear sets I choose, traits, enchants, the Mundus stones, mainly the gear side and the Mundus stone side. Not necessarily food or drinks or anything like that, but just this other stuff. And there's a reason why I use a lot of the sets I do, and I don't use a lot of trial sets in my builds. Now, the reason I don't use a lot of trial setups in my builds is because, one, not a lot of people understand what you need to get those sets, what sets you can use to get to that point. And so what I do a lot of times, if you notice, is I will use a crafted set, I'll use an overland set, I will use a monster set, or I'll use a monster set, a dungeon set, and an overland set. But I always use things in similar combinations to how you would be, what would make your character more effective, but also more capable with the role you're trying to play in the situation. Now, in the case of this character, I know I said I'm not doing the Trinity system, which I'm not, but you can, just looking at a build, you can tell what basically the kind of role it's meant to be played as, but the flexibility in the build comes from the skills when I show you what skills I have unlocked. But when it comes to sets, there's a lot of sets in this game, and in fact, one of the sites I do use besides ESO sets, which was created by Alcast and Wooler, is I do use the ESO wiki, which was created by Fextra Life and his group of people. So I'm going to use the wiki right now. I'm gonna back out. I'm going to show you guys. So I'm on the wiki here, and the wiki has a lot of great things for the sets. Now I'm going to put a link in the description below for this if you want to use it yourself to look at different stuff. It's not 100% accurate, okay? Some of these sets are not, some of them are up to date, some aren't up to date, and a lot of that comes from the fact that what they'll do is, like, if you go into DLC sets and you look at Greymoor, a lot of the Greymoor sets are pretty close to what they're going to be when they go live, but there's still a chance or possibility of changes. So there is that thing, and then along with mythic sets as well, there is that thing that things could change. So let's worry about that when the time comes, kind of thing, So that's one reason why I don't use a lot of the trial sets, though, is because I want to show people what they can use to get to that point. A lot of times, even when I show like a build using a dungeon set, there is a ton of other sets in the game, light sets, and all you have to do is look through here. You can look, and it'll tell you the armor type, the style, the location, and which DLC is required. Now, if it says something like Cyrodiil, that it's going to drop in Cyrodiil. It has no required DLC. Some are going to say things like, hold on, Stormhaven. This drops in the zone of Stormhaven, no DLC required. So there's a lot of sets that you can get easily in the game. I mean, really easy. Just doing delves, public dungeons, world bosses, and doing dark anchors, and a lot of the base game areas will get you a lot of the sets you can use in getting you to higher content difficulty. But some of these sets, a lot of these sets can be used indefinitely. And the reason I say indefinitely is just like with this build right here. If you look at the gear I have my monster set, and it's literally at CP 160. It's at its max CP. It's gold quality. And remember, all sets in this game, any set in the game, can be gotten at CP 160. Any set can be upgraded to the quality of gold. Any set can take a gold enchant, or any quality enchant you want to put into it. And yes, some Some sets are harder to get than others. There's a lot of times where you can get by with purple on your gear and on your jewelry and gold weapons a lot easier than you can going out and getting it gold. The only time you really want to gold out a build, and this is no lie, is when you have that build finalized. Like when you're locking it in and you're like, I don't want to change anything about it. I like the way it works as is. This is what I'm going to do. Now I will admit that you can still use gold enchants and it'll still gain the benefits of gold enchants. You just won't get the benefits of gold quality. So you can even change this set to have Trirune, or like I said in the video, you can leave it arcane. It's really up to the player, and that's it. And the thing you also have to understand, any build you see, it doesn't matter who makes it, where it comes from, anything. The build is just a guide. It's just a tool used to guide you in what would work for that play style. And like when you see sets and skills, those are just suggestions. Like literally everything we do that content creators do for builds is suggestions. And even though we might say like this is going to be your best option, there's other options to get you there. And those other options might have similar 2 to 4 piece bonuses. And that's the other thing I want to talk about is 2 to 4 piece bonuses. Because a lot of people think that, like, oh, well, why aren't you using Reliquin then instead of Hunting's Rage? Well, I could get Reliquin, and I could change my monster set to heavy and light, and run 5-piece Reliquin on the body, run 5-piece spinners down here. And then with the Reliquin, though, you have to understand, it only drops in medium. So you have to change the weight of your monster set, because if you're wearing a medium, you're going to have 7 medium. So you're not going to be able to take the full benefits of the Undaunted skill line's passives, because this does require you to wear one of every armor type to get that 6% increase. Now, if you're willing to just take the 2% increase you would get in all 3 stats, you can do that. But you got to remember, everything you do changes how your character's overall effectiveness becomes. So that means even if you're playing a build that's made for, say, hardcore DPS, that build, the design of that build or that character is to do damage. But you still have access to 100 different skills that you can use that allow you a lot of flexibility. So you can literally equip all different kinds of tools. Then you can also change out your your attributes and stuff. But going back to gear and trying to stay on the focus of gear right now, the idea here is that when you see a build and you see like, oh, the person says, oh, you want to use divines on everything, again, they literally explain why divines is going to be the option you're going to want to go with. Now, for me, I don't do a lot of that stuff. I look at it as a person is playing to progress and become better. As you progress and you become better with playing the game, you become better at managing your resources, at managing your rotation, at managing all this stuff. You don't need as much as what these builds that I offer might have. So you might not need invigorating. You might not need those things. But it's a matter of learning to play the build. See, like when you start playing a character in this game, you don't have the build. So when you get to the point where you can make the build and you get it set up to the description that the person gave you, and you see how it works, well, eventually you're going to get to the point where you kind of master the playstyle. You master the skill rotation. You master to use that character and all the tools they have available. And once you do that, then you'll realize, like, man, I really don't need invigorating. I can change this. So you can literally change things to your own preference, and this goes on even further when you start getting into more of doing dungeons or doing trials or doing PvP, or you want your character to be well rounded for all content. And this brings me to the subject of solo play. And something that a lot of people bring up to me a lot of times when they say, your build looks like it's made more for solo play. Well, here's the thing you have to understand. If a build has a really good capability in solo play, imagine them in a 4-man group. Imagine them in a 12-man trial group. Now, a lot of times people are going to say, yeah, but you play really selfishly. Well, when you play solo, yes, you're going to be selfish because you're playing to be all three roles in one. There's a lot of times you'll see, and even recently in some Outcast solo builds, I've noticed that he's been doing the same thing, using really defensive tools with offensive stuff. So he'll use like really heavy DPS build, but he'll intermix a lot of offense or defensive skills with offensive capabilities, like brawler or some type of shield or some kind of heal or something that keeps him more effectively in the fight. And if you notice, like when he did his run today, or his video today through the Cradle of Shadows, that's a really challenging dungeon to play solo. And I'm not going to lie, I have soloed it. That thing's really challenging. But a lot of it comes down to your ability to play a character, having the right tools, having the right, play, like character playability. A lot of times, like I've seen a lot of people do this. I've seen a lot of people take their DPS builds and just go solo dungeons because they're pretty much don't have anything else to do. They're waiting on their guild to get on to go do trials, or they're waiting for their guild to get on to go do something. So they'll just go run a dungeon by themselves in both normal, veteran, or even sometimes in hard mode. And it's not to challenge themselves, or a lot of times it is to challenge yourself, but you're willing to do it because why not? Why not take a chance at it? And then you hear a lot of people complain about solo play, saying things like solo play kind of degrades group play because you're showing people how you can play effectively solo, but only like a handful of people can do it. No, anyone can solo a dungeon. Anyone can. Even one-bar builds can solo dungeons. And they do it already. I mean, look at what they do in Maelstrom Arena. That's a freaking arena that is made for one person and has the difficulty of a veteran dungeon almost. Because you have to fight through waves of mobs. All a dungeon is fighting through waves of mobs and bosses. That's it. And the encounter location. So like when you're playing through, for example, I use this a lot. I use this dungeon a lot. Depths of Malatar. Well, if you look at any of the other dungeons, there are a few DLC dungeons where it's really easy to get to a boss encounter, but it's what you have to fight along the way to get there. And that's a lot of the reasons why I use Depths of Malatar, is it's just really easy to go from the first trash pulls to the first boss encounter. And I can do it really fast because I know the encounters that well. I know the challenge of it. I can go in there on normal or veteran and do it, and do it to some degree. Now, if I was to take it on veteran, I would change my build. Just like if I was gonna take on something that had a lot more harder difficulty, I will change how I play to give me the tools necessary, like my skills and my stuff. Now, the other thing that a lot of people ask is why besides the gear sets, which I really didn't go into explaining. Let me go ahead and explain this a little bit more here. So a lot of the times why I use crafted sets, especially the sets you guys see me use in things like Hunting's Rage, Julianus, I'm trying to remember them all. So there's Night Mother's Gaze, Hunting's Rage, Julianus, Kvetch's Gladiator, all these different sets. The reason I use them is because I have access to them, and they're easily accessible when you can craft at max level. So I can craft any of these. Now, that can be a problem for a new player because you might not know how to get it. But you can always ask in Zone Chat, hey, can somebody craft me a set of Hunting's Rage at CP 160? I can give you the materials and give you a tip, kind of thing. A lot of crafters will be like, yeah, sure, no problem. And they'll run over, they'll do it for you, and they'll bring it back. And it just takes minutes. So It's not a really hard process to do or to get these sets. It's a matter of, now that you have it, how are you going to put it into your build, kind of thing. So a lot of times I do use a certain combination of builds too, on a lot of things. Even if I make a tank, you'll notice I'll use Kvetch's Gladiator a lot of time, because you get the two things, a weapon critical and the weapon damage, and then you win the target. And it's no longer when the target's under 25% health. Now it's when the target's under 25% health, you add X amount of weapon damage, but it's not to light and heavy attacks. It's to any damage you do. So basically take this off, you know, like the last line, you know, the sectional line, and that's it. It adds 1,475 weapon damage. Well, why is this good for somebody that's playing a tank? Well, a lot of times when you're playing a tank in the game, you're not just playing, again, you're not just playing dungeons. You literally have to play through the content. So you're playing through the story, you're playing through all this stuff, and you might be using that set with, like, say, even Elysian Order, or, you know, Bahara's Curse, or you're using Beekeepers, or you're using Plague Doctors, or Eben, or Brands of Imperium. Whatever the set. The nice thing is that it gives you that capability to use your character more effectively. So you get that higher crit chance, you get that higher weapon damage, you get that more capability to play the content more effectively. So as you progress and you get to the point where, let's say you want to play in-game content, then you can start equipping those other sets that other people suggest, like running Alkosh and Eben, or running the Yulnakrin, Eben, and such. You get those options. See? And with those options, now you get more playability in your character, because now your character has those tools to amplify the group play for that purpose if you're playing the meta. But even if you're not playing the meta, you could still use Kvetch's Gladiator and Yulnakrin in combination with each other. And it's actually a really good combination. Now, you're not going to end up with maybe 35k, 40k health with the way I set it up. But it doesn't mean you can't adjust it to have that. So you still have that high crit chance, you still have that high weapon damage, you still have a decent amount of stamina. So when you're not tanking, you have these tools to play the rest of the content without the difficulty or the struggle that you would normally have. That's another reason why I do a lot of tank builds the way I do. But again, and I'll say this, you'll notice a lot of times I take sets and use them in a certain order. I'll take a lot of sets and I'll do exactly like I did with this one. I'll use a set that gives me the effectiveness for what I primarily use. So if I'm using a stamina character, or if I'm making a hybrid character and they're using weapons that are the sword and the bow, I'll have it reflect that in the primary 5-piece body set. And then in my secondary set, I'll have it reflect the other benefit I'm building too. So like in this case, that high spell pen, high spell damage, high magicka, so I can hybridize the character better, more effectively. So that's why when I look at sets, also when I'm creating a build, I like to get into looking at sets and how I can take advantage of them in that particular build. So you'll see some builds where it doesn't, you can't really see how the sets are going to work when you first see them, and then when I start talking about skills, you start to notice, oh, that's why he does this, why he's using this combination. And then even when you look at the skills I have in my bar, I only have one magicka skill on this bar, and I have 2 magicka skills on this bar, but only one does damage, right? That's funnel health. So why would I use funnel health, but I wouldn't use other ones? Remember, the idea of this build is to take advantage of the magicka, not necessarily for damage, but for the benefit of what it can add to your playstyle or to your tool set. So in this case, all the class abilities I unlocked, most of them were stamina based. Killer's Blade, stamina morph. Ambush, stamina morph. Relentless Focus, stamina morph. And the Shadow Tree, siphon attacks, stamina morph. Under siphoning, leeching strengths, stamina morph. power extraction, stamina morph. The rest of the abilities that I didn't show you are all magicka based. That means it requires me to have a decent pool of magicka, but on top of that, some of these abilities do damage. So having a high spell damage amplifies that capability. Having higher spell penetration amplifies my ability to do more damage with those abilities. So no matter what I do, I always have tools in the build that play to the character's strengths. And it plays to the character's ability to effectively do, like if you look at the Slayer, like the difference between the Slayer and this. The Slayer is using like a high spell crit thing, higher in spell crit, higher in spell damage, higher in weapon damage than this build. Why? Well, because that build is going to take advantage of higher spell damage and spell critical for that reason, to get that higher damage output. This one's not doing it for the higher damage output necessarily, but more for the idea of like, I have some damage abilities, but then I have all these other magic abilities that do stuff that benefit my playstyle, like Shrewd Offerings. It requires health, and it's a heal. It's based off, the heal itself is based off of not my max health, but my max magicka and my max spell damage. The Crippling Grasp, this does spell damage and is based off that, but it's also has the immobilizing effect. It has that snare effect on it. So you get that just a little bit of extra out of it. The same thing when you look at the assassination tree. I have 2 magic abilities. Neither of them do damage, but I need a good amount of magicka to make them more, to where I can use them more effectively. Now this doesn't cost me anything. They did change that. I'm glad they did do that. They got rid of the cost. But this one does cost me magicka if I want to use it. So I need magicka in order to use some of these abilities more effectively. Refreshing Path costs magicka. Now this costs magicka, but it's based off my max health. The heal is. So it's the opposite of my other abilities. So the higher my health is, the more effective the heal will be, but I still need magicka to cast it, and it takes 4,000. So if I had 9,000 magic, if I made this more of a stamina DPS, and I used stamina food, dumped everything to stamina, no magicka whatsoever, I would have like 9k magicka. Dark Cloak wouldn't be as effective, because I wouldn't be able to use it as often, because I wouldn't have the magicka resource to use it. And that goes for a lot of things. I mean, you see how I would play the build openly. But when you notice when I was playing in the dungeon, I wasn't burning through a lot of magicka. I was burning through a lot of stamina, but I was getting that stamina back pretty effectively, because I was also throwing a lot of heavy attacks in there and some other stuff. So it has its capabilities for resource management and damage and survivability. And then just switching around the skills allows me more flexibility in the way this build would work. So like if I wanted something that'd give me a stronger heal, something that'd make me more defensive, make me more tanky, so I could solo more effectively, I might take like the assassination skill, Mirage, throw it on the back bar, and drop the Refreshing Path. Now you're thinking, but you're giving up a heal. Then I just go back to the shadow side, I grab Dark Cloak, and I throw Dark Cloak on the front bar where Power Extraction is. I just move Power Extraction over to Swallow Soul, and then I move Brawler over to here, and get rid of Wrecking Blow, and then if I need a shield, I can go down to the guild skill line, Undaunted, and I can grab Spike Bone Shield. Now, Spike Bone Shield, the damage shield it absorbs, is based off of my max health. The damage it deals back to the enemy is based off my max health, but it's like the percentage values are based off my weapon and spell damage, or my weapon damage and spell weapon crit. So the amount of damage it returns is based off my percentage bonuses I get. So like my CP and different things like that. That's why it's 132% of the direct damage returns back to the enemy, and it scales off your max health. So it's like you get this really cool balance in here of this high crit, high damage, high survivability type build that you can take advantage of a lot of different tools. And then let's say I need to tank. Well, I got Inner Beast, I can use this to taunt, but I might not be tanking like a veteran DLC dungeon unless I've done it a lot and I'm really skilled with this character and I can play it really well. I mean, if I can solo it pretty well, I can probably tank it pretty well. But tanking and soloing are two different things. Again, you're now playing in a group, so you don't need as many of the other abilities you might have, like you might think. But you can still take advantage of some of these tools. And this, again, brings you back to the whole thing here of like how your sets play into your build. Now, when it comes to Mundus stones, the same thing applies. If there's something I need that I don't have in my character build, let's say I need more weapon damage, I can willingly go over here and swap it out with the Thief Mundus stone. Now, you guys are going to say, but you're going to give up some weapon crit and spell crit to do that. Yes, but I get that higher weapon damage. And that's what the warrior does, is it gives you that higher weapon damage by 309. So in order for me to take more advantage of this weapon damage and that higher crit and getting some higher crit, I can always do several different things. So I can go into the Fighters Guild, I can grab Camouflage. I can throw it on my bar, on both my bars, so I can take advantage of that higher savagery. So I can focus on higher critical, and then I get that major berserk. I can still use Magicka as healing and other tools because I have it readily available. And then also I have there's a lot of other tools I have access to besides just this. I have the Fighters Guild, Mage's Guild, Psijic Order, Undaunted, the Alliance War skills, even weapon skills, and one armor skill, and even some world skills in soul magic. If I take on like being a vampire or werewolf, I gain those skills as well. And I can learn all these different skills that give you these different tools. And again, Mundus stones play a lot into like what you're trying to do with the character at the time. Now, if you're going for more crit, you're going to go with the Thief Stone. You want to be more tanky, that you got choices there. You can go with the Lady Mundus Stone, who's going to give you higher resistances. You can go with the Lord Mundus Stone to give you more health. You can even go over here to the Steed Mundus Stone and give yourself more health recovery. It really just depends on what you want to do. Now, this costs you nothing to change, just the time to get to the Mundus Stone and do it, unless you have all the Mundus Stones in a guild hall or at a house that you have access to, whatever. They cost you nothing. Now, even changing your stats on your character might cost you, but it's actually quite inexpensive when you look at the cost. So I'm going to go ahead and jump over to Elden Root. Elden Root, the shrine for changing your stats is right there, right out the main teleport thing, the main Wasteland shrine. So, and I'll show you guys what I mean by that. So when I get here, I'm just going to run over and show you where this is at. So, and it is. It's really easy. And just like a lot of people say, well, yeah, but what if you don't have the skills unlocked and all this kind of stuff? That's the point of the game. That's why they give you so much content to play through, is so you can unlock a lot of skills. You can use those quests to gain experience in those skills that you're trying to learn. So like if I wanted to learn Sword and Shield, do I have to equip a Sword and Shield to learn Sword and Shield? No. I just have to equip one of the Sword and Shield skills on my toolbar. So when I'm playing through the quests, and I want to learn how to be more effective with Sword and Shield, I unlock Puncture, put it on my bar somewhere, and just not even worry about it. Go play the game. I'm still going to get experience for the skill and the skill line. Now, the more skills I have equipped, the more effective I can be. Having the tool equipped gives me more experience in that line, but I don't have to have it equipped literally to gain the skills. So here we are in Elden Root. When you get to the Way Shrine, right over here is the shrines to reset your stats. And it's this first shrine. Now look how much this costs. 3,200. This character is at max level. So it only costs you 3,200 gold to change your attributes to whatever role you might want to be. So if I wanted to be a tank, I reset my attribute points. I can go in here and I can go just like this. Have 31,000. Now, I might not be super capable with my skills as much as I once was. But that's fine. That's the sacrifice that you make to play these roles. you're willing to sacrifice your damage capabilities to tank, or you're willing to make that sacrifice to these different attributes to do the role that you're looking to do. Or in this case, I mean, I could just leave it as is and just go tank a normal dungeon, or I can go tank, probably a lot of the base game dungeons I can tank because I know them so well. DLC dungeons might be a different story. I know a lot of them, but I don't know them like 100% because I just don't spend a lot of time in dungeons except to get what I need, and then I never really go back. So, because I don't really see a point in doing dungeons. Now, every once in a while, I'll do my dailies to get keys, which is fine, and that's how you get your monster sets and everything like that. But a lot of the times, I just don't even waste my time because I want to play other parts of the game. I want to do other stuff. Like, with my characters being so high in power, like 810 CP, and having the, access to the best gear, I can literally just go play any content I want. So when even I hear this, can I play this build in PvP? Well, yeah, any build can be played in any area of the game. It's just a matter of, how much time are you going to invest in that area? Are you going to play in mostly PvP? Because if you are, you might want to change the traits on the gear to be something more effective to PvP. If you're going to spend a lot of time in doing trials, and you've become really skilled with the build, that's why I say you can change the traits. A lot of the times why I do the traits and enchants, Mundus stones, all that stuff, is just to kind of give you a basic idea of how you can build the build, and in a way to give you an easier way of playing without any of the complications you might have for trying to jump in and play a meta build. Like playing a meta stamina build can be really hard on new players because they just don't understand all the different resources. They don't, like how resources work. They don't understand how to keep the flow of resources coming in really effectively. They don't know, understand rotations as well or anything else. This is a way to alleviate some of that pressure off of them so they have a build that can play. And that's, again, why I do a lot of the builds I do very basic. And I don't focus on the in-game stuff, because when you focus only on the, and I don't like to say in-game, but when you focus only on the trial sets and you focus only on dungeon sets, or really hard to get sets, the question you get asked a lot is, how do I get those sets? But when you offer them builds like this, they don't ask so much, how do I get those sets? They ask, they start asking questions about the traits. They start asking questions about the skills you're using. And that's, again, why I show you all the different skills I unlock. And again, I keep saying the traits and enchants are only what you need them to be. And when I get to talking, sometimes I have to constantly move. So I'm going to go back to my place here in this villa and finish talking and then close out the video. So. But yeah, I mean, that's literally why a lot of times you'll see me use sets. Or I'll say things like, you can easily change a build into what you need it to be. And really, it is. It's super easy to do. Yes, it's going to cost you a little bit of gold if you want to switch the stats. But changing your skills, if you've already played through most of the game's content, you've earned skill points. It should give you enough skill points to unlock other skills to where you have the tools necessary to play other things. Play more effectively in solo, play more effectively in groups, play more effectively in not only groups, but also in dungeons, and in a role you want to play at the time. And it's interesting, because I hear people say things like, well, with this build, can I play DPS? And it'll be like a sword and shield build. And it's like, yeah. Sword and shield, it might make you more defensive, but it has a lot of offensive capability. I mean, over half the skills are DPS skills. There's only two skills that are not really, well, no, one skill that's not DPS related. All the other skills are DPS related. The ultimate is even DPS related to some degree, because one gives you this thing to block, and it doesn't cost you anything to use the sword and shield ability, so you can just spam away. with them, and it's like, oh, okay, so I can just spam away my low slash with my power slam or my reverberating bash, whatever you need to use. So yeah, there is a lot of tools in the Sword and Shield skill line that are very defensive. The passives, a lot of the passives are defensive, but at the same time they're not. Like Battlefield Mobility, yeah, you can move faster while blocking, which is fine. That makes sense. Deflect Bolts increases the amount of damage you can block from projectiles and ranged attacks. Okay, Deadly Bash improves the stamina or the standard bash attack, causing them to deal 1,500 more damage at a cost of 40% less stamina. Sword and Board increases your weapon damage by 5% and reduces the amount of damage you can block by 20%. Fortress reduces the stamina cost of your one-handed sword and shield abilities and reduces your cost of blocking. So this increases your blocking effect and your damage. This reduces your stamina cost so you can use the abilities more effectively if you have more stamina. So again, yes, you can play it as a DPS. It's just the idea of the sword and shield is to be more defensive because you get that blocking capability. So even if you're playing a DPS using a sword and shield, you get higher defensive capabilities. Then when you incorporate the fact that you do get higher resistances using a sword and shield, just not also from equipping a shield, but also from a passive in the CP tree, here you get Bulwark. While you have a shield or frost staff equipped, your spell and physical resistance is increased by 1,500. But then even when you look at a shield itself, and I'll go down here and I'll just show you what I mean by looking at the weapon equipment box. Oops. The weapon equipment box for spinners. The shield itself says it gives you 1,720 armor, and that's in Divines. Now you could get this in Sturdy, you could get this in Reinforced, you can get it infused, you can do whatever you want with the enchant on it, or the trait on it, and the enchant on it. Now it works the same as armor does, so it's adding an extra piece of armor to your character, which is going to increase your survivability. But then you still get to use a one-handed weapon, which, guess what, gives you weapon damage. That damage applies to both spell and weapon. So you get that damage increase to those two things. And then on top of that, depending on what, like it doesn't have, depending on what weapon you're using, you get extra benefits. Like using an axe gives you a bleed, this gives you higher penetration, this gives you higher damage. Instead, it just gives you an overall 5% from the skill line to your damage. So it still has DPS capabilities. And it's just that it's more defensive with offensive capabilities. And it's just like using like the difference between two-handed skills, on which way you go with them. Like you have your offensive skills, and then you have your more defensive skills. And you have different types of offensive skills versus your defensive skills. Like you have Rally, that's a defensive skill because it gives you a way of giving you a heal and it boosts your weapon damage. So it kind of does both, but it's more of like a defensive type thing because you rally to get your this health thing going and to boost your weapon damage. Well, that weapon damage applies to a lot of different things. When you look at the skill line for two-handed, when it comes to Carve, for example, your weapon damage increases how much damage the ability does and how much damage it does over the 10-second bleed. Well, since it's a sword, it also gets that 5% increase in damage from this right here. Or sword increases your damage by 6%. But then you look at what it does if it's an axe. You have a chance of applying a bleed over 6 seconds. Now, if you wanted to, you could change this to an axe, still have a chance of getting a bleed on Brawler or on Cleave, and then switch to Brawler, and you'll get a damage shield with a bleed, with a chance of bleeding, whenever you deal damage with that weapon. So, grants your melee attacks a 16% chance to apply a bleed. So, you still get that chance of applying a bleed. And then on top of that, you got to remember, two-handed, their light and heavy attack damage up to 3 other nearby enemies for 50% of the damage you inflicted on the primary target. So it's got a lot of AoE cleave damage. Then you look at dual wield. They get this 25% increase in damage when enemies below 20%, or your increases the damage with dual wield abilities by 20% against enemies under 25% health. Now just imagine if you were using something like Kvetch's Gladiator, where it increases your damage, your weapon damage, by 1475 to all abilities you do. That even applies to this. So you get 20% more damage, plus you get the this, and you have that 20% when they're below 25% health. So now you get that 1475 weapon damage added to that. Plus your light and heavy attacks. Plus everything you do that requires stamina. So it's kind of a cool thing when you look at how you can interact skills and abilities and different things, and you can really break it down and say, okay, I want to use these tools because of this reason. So I mean, even if you look at like two-handed and dual wield, they both have that perk for the weapons. So on dual wield, each axe gives you an 8% chance. So if you have two axes, it's 16% chance. Same as a two-handed. Swords give you a 3% chance. Two swords gives you 6%. And then when you look at the penetration that a mace gives you, each mace ignores 10% of the enemy's physical resistance, and then daggers give you higher critical. Well, there is no dagger in two-handed, but there is an axe, a mace, and a sword, so you get that same benefit here. And your mace, if you're using a two-handed, gets 20% of the resistances ignored when you attack. And then you get that physical damage for the bleed with the axe, and then you get 6% damage. So it's the same benefits, just in a different order. And that's why a lot of times you'll see, like, I'll do the dual wield, and I'll equip a sword and dagger. The reason why is because with a sword and dagger, you get that 3% increase in damage done, all damage done, not just with the sword, all damage done. And you get that 8% chance with that offhand to apply a bleed. So anytime you do a heavy attack, you get a chance to bleed. Anytime you do an ability that requires both to hit, you get a chance to bleed. Now it says 8%. Well, think about this. If you're using something like Flurry, you're going to hit 5 times. You have 1 in 5 times to apply a bleed. Well, when you take 8%, and you multiply it by 5, that's basically what happens. Each time you hit, you have an 8% chance, but that 8% basically becomes multiplied because you have so many chances of doing it. So you have 8 times 5 chances to apply it, not 8 times or 5 times 8. It's 8 times the 5 attacks to get it to apply. So you get this, again, multiple ways that you can apply that bleed. And so that's a lot of the reasons why when you see me do builds, I look at every aspect a character has. I don't look at them from a group perspective. I look at them from the character perspective and how they can play, and then I look at them with all the other tools I unlock with skills and stuff, and how I can use their sets to benefit them, not just benefit their group, but benefit them, and then benefit their group with the skills they have unlocked. So you get all these different tools and all this different flexibility in the build that allows for a lot of options. So you can go, hey, I want to do this with this build, but I want the capability to do this also, or this also. And so when you see a lot of times when I do character builds, they have a lot of, again, flexibility. Even if I make a Magicka build, you'll see I'll unlock a lot of Magicka skills. Most of the stamina skills are going to be in the Fighter's Guild skill line. Some will be in the Undaunted skill line and the Assault skill line. That's it. The rest of it's all Magicka. Because it would be better to use all the magic abilities I had access to and use the stamina abilities for the purpose of what they do. So like even using Flawless Dawnbreaker, I can use it on a Magicka build. Again, you can use the Fighter's Guild ability Flawless Dawnbreaker, and this thing isn't based off of max stamina. It does physical damage, but it's based off your highest primary stat. Now, Silver Leash would be a great ability if I was a mage damage dealer and I didn't have a way to pull enemies to me, I could use this. Yeah, it cost me stamina, but guess what? I'm not using my stamina for anything other than blocking and dodge rolling. If I have 19k stamina on my Magicka character, because I'm using Tri-Stat food, I can use this more effectively. The same thing applies with Turn Evil. The same thing applies with Camouflage Hunter. Now, why would I want to use Camouflage Hunter? Because it gives me this Major Savagery and I get this Minor Berserk. Well, the Minor Berserk would come in handy because I could take advantage of the Minor Berserk. The crit, not so much, unless I was using something that was physical damage. So if I was using like Bard Trap, or I was using something from the Undaunted skill line, like say Tangled Webs, or I was using, say, Spike Bone Shield, or I was using something where I could get advantage from critical damage, or even if I was using the Alliance War skill, Razor Caltrops, to apply Major Fracture to enemies to increase physical damage for my allies, I have those tools, even as a Magicka character. So there's a lot of things you have to understand. A group is only as good as the tools you have. So even if you make the perfect group, like a lot of people think the meta does, the meta doesn't create the perfect group. They created the perfect group dynamic. And there's a difference between a group dynamic and a group. Okay? A group dynamic is taking specific classes, specific tools, and putting them together to give you that perfect setup. And it's not perfect. It's still flawed. And I'll say that. Everything you do with a character is flawed. Because you can only build them to be one thing or another. You can't build them to be everything perfectly. You have to build them into their categorical design. So even if you made a character in heavy armor that used a two-handed weapon, like a two-handed sword and a bow, you're not necessarily just really good at DPS. Because you're wearing heavy armor, so you're really defensive as well. So you get that trade-off again. You know, you're sacrificing high DPS for survivability, but at the same time you still have good DPS because you're using sets that can play off that. Like maybe you're using the Sword Dancer set with heavy armor, so you get that high resistances, and you're using, let's say, Night Mother's Gate, so you get the high penetration. You get that, you know, whenever you deal critical damage, you get the two things of crit from that. The third thing of crit from the Sword Dancer, you get this high weapon damage for all your two-handed abilities, all that stuff. Now, you could take that, put that on any class, that combination of sets, and then find a monster set that complements it, like Veladriths, Silitrix, Selene, Thunderfist or Stormfist. You know, any of the Krogs, any of these things that give you increased damage capabilities because they give you damage passives, and put it all together. And you've got this character that has all these capabilities of doing two-handed weapon damage, immense two-handed weapon damage, and then you have high physical penetration. Well, you still have access to stamina and Magicka abilities, because your class and the skills you have access to do that. So building your character out with having layers to their stats, not just focusing on one only, but focusing on this idea of, hey, I can use these other stats for these advantages, allows you to do that. But if you unlocked all the stamina-based skills you have and looked at how many Magicka ones you had left, you would still have like more of an equal there, and except for the fact that you have all access to all the two-handed skills, you have access to all the bow skills, and then all your class skills that are stamina based, all your other skill lines, like you have access to where you can use the Fighters Guild more effectively, not the Mages Guild so much, not the Psijic Order, even though there is a few skills in here you can take advantage of, like Crushing Weapon. And then on Undaunted, pretty much you could take advantage of all the skills here because you could still use them. When it comes to Alliance War, your assault skills versus support, you're only using 2 skills from support because the rest of these are primarily used in PvP, so you wouldn't use them in PvE. So you could use Reviving Barrier, you could use Efficient Purge, and you could use Stalwart Guard. All these can be used in PvE, and you could use them effectively, even as a DPS. But that's my point. That's why when you see a lot of my builds, that it's mostly, I look at every aspect of the character. I don't look at just one side and say, oh, this is a stamina build, I'm going to use nothing but stamina skills. I don't do that. And then when it comes to like my gear, if you notice, like my gear reflects the ability the character can play. And it affects their capabilities. So when I see people say things like, oh, you're not using this on a healer, and you should, because it gives the group these benefits, look where those sets drop a lot of times at what people are saying to use. A lot of times people are telling you use trial sets. Well, guess what? Not everyone has access to trial sets, so I'm not going to set every build I do using the best options. I'd much rather show them the options they have readily available in the game, easily accessible to use, so they can build their character up to using that other stuff if they want to, but it's not necessary unless you focus into certain game points. Like if you focus in doing in-game, using a lot of trial sets is a good idea, especially the trial sets that have Slayer, Minor Slayer, and the minor defense capabilities on it, because then you get those capabilities to your character as well. And a lot of those sets work out really well for both healers, tanks, damage dealers, all that stuff, because it gives you those more flexibility in the character and more flexibility in the options that you can use. So there is a lot of tools that give you more capability to play in that content. But then if you're not focused on that content a lot and you're doing a lot of content, there's no reason for you to get those sets necessarily. You can use what you have already existing and available, and just upgrade it to gold quality, and it's going to be just as good as the stuff you get there, just not having the same benefits. So it still has that, it just minus those perks that set gets. And that's where you got to look at when it comes from a player perspective, and you look at what players want to play versus what you show them they can play. You can really deep dive into this game's creative tools that allow you that idea to create flexible characters that can have all these different options. And it falls back into the idea of, like, somebody would say, well, you couldn't play this as a healer. You want to make a bet? I can make this character into a healer in 5 seconds. All I have to do is change my Mundus stone and change my stats. Boom, I'm a healer. And change my skills. Think about that. Skills, that, and I'm done. I don't have to change anything else. I don't have to go through this long process of trying to find the gear sets, because I've already got gear sets that reflect my capabilities of using both magic and stamina. So this character can play a good healer, they're just not a god healer. This character can play a good DPS, just not a god DPS. This character can play a tank, but how effective depends on how well I can play him as a tank. And that again brings me back to that whole concept from the first video, there where I said, if you look at the game's design and when it came out, a lot of companies at the time were trying to break away from the idea of a locked Trinity system. Guild Wars 2, Secret World, there was other games too that came out, like Destiny and Division, that had that no Trinity kind of thing to it. Even though Division and Destiny are more cooperative online games, they're still online MMORPGs because they're massive multiplayer online role-playing games. They're just more fast-paced because they're shooters compared to this. Now, this is an action combat system, just like the Secret World had an action combat system, and even more so now than it did before. And, other games did too. Like, DDO had an action combat system with a kind of weird, like, hybrid mix of combat. But it still used a lot of the Trinity systems. You could taunt, you could do that kind of stuff. And it was funny, but anyone could learn a taunt in that game. Like, even a cleric could learn a taunt. And they even had a cleric path that allows you to be a battle cleric, which is basically a tank. Or basically a DPS. And then you had, like, these other two paths for the cleric. One was, like, high healing, one was high magic damage. So you got these 3 paths. Very similar to this game. You have those 3 paths to choose from. Tank, healer, damage dealer. But you have to choose how you want to play your character based on the choice of how you design them as they play. So like even playing a cleric in a DDO, you're playing a healer type character. A lot of your skills are group supportive skills, heals, buffs, things like that. But mages even have group support skills. Bards have group support skills. Warlocks have group support skills. There's a lot of the classes share a lot of the similar functionality. The difference is their tools they have available are different. So you can play a tank in DDO and be any class. But this is a game that came out in 2006, not 2016, not 2012, not 2008, or anything like that. Those other games that I talked about, like Secret World and all this kind of stuff, those games were trying to redefine how MMOs worked. And so when you look at ESO and you look at what you can do with a character, real simple, like adjust stats, adjust this, adjust that, it's right there, it's in your face, you can do it. Anyone can. So that's why I started changing my focus from the Trinity builds to a more open-ended system, so that I could show you, like, hey, if you want to play this character this way, you grab this food, you grab this drink, and you can go play stamina DPS. You want to go play Magicka DPS, go grab this food, this drink, these skills, and use these skills instead. Now you can focus more on that, but you still have this high stamina pool and high weapon damage that you can still take advantage of, because you can flip-flop. So a lot of times you'll notice that a lot of my builds are one way or the other, but they still have access to certain tools and certain functionality. But a lot of it is more like it's going to be support based, it's going to be that kind of thing, to give them that flexibility to play in a group in that way. So, but yeah, that's pretty much it. I mean, I there's not a whole lot more I can talk about. I mean, there is, but that's pretty much what I wanted to talk about in this video, was like how sets can reflect your play style, your build, and why I use the sets I do, and why I don't use a lot of end game sets is because of that purpose. Now, I do have a build coming out tomorrow. It does use an end game set. Don't think I'm trying to throw you off with it. I use it for a reason, because it plays really well into it, but in the video I will explain, if you don't have access to that set, there is other sets you can use, and I will list them off. Kvetch's Gladiator, Hunting's Rage, and Night Mother's Gaze. So all three of those sets will work into this build if you want them to. But it's using a trial set that actually plays really well into its the idea of it. So, and I really can't wait to show you guys that build tomorrow. It's really cool. It's a lot of fun. I have a blast with it. Like, every time I get on that build, I don't want to get off from playing it, because it's so much fun. It's so, and it's not that it's so flexible. It's the fact that it just has so much playability in the way it works that it makes it fun. So, but yeah, that's pretty much it for this video. The next player's character build guide video, part 3, will be a lot about how interacting with the CP system, like putting it into the character, and why I do again use a lot of this like universal CP setup, so you can see how it affects the play style. And then I'll also explain, like, hey, if you don't like these CP setups, you can adjust them to, you know, more of the meta, or more of this, or more of that. Mine already does that. It just doesn't do it to the degree they use. And so again, I do want to give a shout out to the you know, all the content creators, because you know, especially those who teach us a lot of things, like, you know, Alcast, like Wooler did. Even Nephis is doing a lot of really great videos lately, explaining things, and, you know, Asian God, and Dots Gaming, Zynode, Shimmer, I know I'm going to screw this up, Miss Biz, and I think I got that right, and, you know, the thousands of others out there that make content for this game, that, you know, try to help people understand more about it, but they don't quite understand the basics. And again, I'm not doing this to create basic builds or weak builds. I'm doing this just to show people what they have available to play in the game. And just showing them some ideas, like giving them inspiration. That's like, I treat my videos more as like I want to inspire people to play the things they want to. I want them to be inspired to play the character they want. And so, yeah. But yeah, that's pretty much it. So thank you all. And to all of you for watching, and yeah, it's been awesome. I still love making videos for ESO, mainly because there's just so much to talk about. There's so many things, and every time they add something new, you get that much more to talk about. So it's really cool. I will be doing a video after the Greymoor comes out, talking about scrying and excavation and all that. I haven't done a lot of that stuff right now, primarily because I've been focused, I haven't been focused on doing the content there. I'm waiting for it to come out. But I am going to do some videos talking about scrying and excavation and that stuff. I will be doing a few builds with some of the mythics pieces, but that will be, again, after Greymoor comes out. I will incorporate some ideas and showing you how you can combo different pieces of gear to get that benefit of that one piece, and why it plays so well into it, and all that stuff. And then it's the same thing like with using the difference between monster sets and not, And I do have a lot of stuff coming out for all that. So that is it, guys. Hope you guys liked the video. If you did, you guys know what's coming next. Go ahead and hit that like button. If you guys want to see more videos by me, you can subscribe. Other than that, I want to thank you all for watching. Until next time, have a wonderful day, and this guy might see you in game. Bye.